So as Matt said, my day job is with IBM. I'm responsible for networking products. But my night and evening job, can you hear me? Okay. My night and evening job for the past 8 months or so has been working with a bunch of smart folks in the industry, like Kelly and folks from the Linux Foundation, to try to launch a open source community focused on SDN called OpenDaylight. I guess about the latter part of last year, a bunch of us had the viewpoint that there was a real need for an open source movement in this area. And we'll talk a little bit about, as we go through this, the value proposition and why we thought that. We started talking amongst ourselves, and it became clear that this was a pretty widespread feeling, right? There was a real sense that the time was right and the opportunity really existed to create something that could be of real value across the industry, and importantly could accelerate the adoption of SDN amongst a whole variety of different customers. So we got people together actually February. We had a big get together where we invited all people who would be interested potentially in forming this, and then decided what we wanted to do, put our heads down, and April of this year we actually formally launched OpenDaylight. So OpenDaylight's about 6 months old now, and the expectation is that we will be releasing our first coordinated release in December of this year, right? So you can go to the website, you can download code already, there's all kinds of things that are available, but the first coordinated release will come December of this year. So let me what do I do here? Go to the next slide. Is there a... I got to use this one, or?
Just push the clicker.
Okay, which clicker? I'm sorry. Is there a clicker here?
You don't have a Mac?
No, okay, I just do that. Okay,
just do that. There you go.
All right, that's fine. No, I thought there was a separate little thing. So what this slide does is it tries to show a little bit about the scope of the project. Right, so this is our kind of standard layered picture. What you see is network at the bottom, applications and services at the top, and then this thing in the middle, which is, I guess, a layer of software that potentially abstracts out some of the functionality from the underlying network, has a set of APIs on top, and then a set of southbound interfaces, protocols that talk to the hardware below. We think about OpenDaylight really as encompassing more than just that middle layer, right? And as you'll see in some of the projects that are slated for release in December, we are focused not just on the controller, not just on southbound APIs and southbound plugins, but also on some application functionality, right? And so our idea really is to create a pretty broad code base, right? Our open source code base around SDN, including obviously, the infrastructure components, but also exemplary applications, services, certainly a whole set of southbound interfaces. We are not in any way wedded to a particular protocol. We'll support OpenFlow, whatever the IETF does, whatever comes out of NFV and other kinds of activities. So we really believe that our objective is to create something very broad-based that can be leveraged by a whole bunch of different industry segments and a whole bunch of different vendors. The project itself is organized under the Linux Foundation. I should mention here that there's nothing unique or special in terms of the affinity to Linux, the operating system, right? I mean, we expect that whatever we build in OpenDaylight will obviously work on a Linux platform. It'll work on other kinds of operating system environments as well. But the reason it's organized under the Linux Foundation is really because of the unique skills that the Linux Foundation has in terms of best practices associated with open source. So this is set up as a project under the Linux Foundation with an independent board of directors, an independent charter, an independent set of rules and regulations. So it really operates as an independent entity, but we get a lot of guidance and a lot of help from the Linux Foundation. It consists of about just under 30 members. I haven't actually counted the latest head count here, but I think it's just about under 30. We started with 17, so we've grown steadily, and we continue to grow almost on a regular, almost weekly basis. The membership is divided into sort of three categories: as platinum, gold, and silver. Really what that reflects is the amount of investment each of these parties is putting into this particular project. So just to give you a sense, the platinum level, each platinum member is committed $500,000 a year for 2 years, plus they have 10 full-time people dedicated to working on this project. Plus, in almost all cases, they bring in intellectual property. So they bring in assets that they have that they would like to contribute to open source, and that becomes potentially part of OpenDaylight. And gold members are commensurately lower, and silver members are commensurately lower as well. But we expect to see this membership grow. What you'll see here largely is vendors represented. There's nothing that limits our membership to vendors. We would like to see the user community also represented here. We are creating actually a special category of so an advisory board where users don't necessarily need to be members per se, but can get involved in OpenDaylight and provide input and guidance to what we're doing. As advisory members. So we're creating an advisory board which will be focused a lot upon users, consumers of OpenDaylight code. Okay, I think that was the next one. I hope I didn't skip one. The project goals are really threefold, right? The most important thing is that we're not a standards body. We're not trying to write specifications, or we are writing code. That's the goal of this project: to write code, right, and to deliver code, and to create something that's robust, extensible, coherent. We don't want just a random set of stuff out there. And as I said, it is a code base, right? So it'll have a fairly broad set of components, but we expect to cover most of the major common components required to build an SDN solution, and in some cases, actually be provide components that might provide even choices for customers, right? So you can pick perhaps multiple different ways of solving a particular problem. So creating the code base, delivering this, and as you'll see, we're on roughly on a biannual cadence in terms of coordinated releases. That is the primary objective of OpenDaylight. Obviously, we can only be successful if we get acceptance, and that acceptance is twofold, right? One is in terms of getting users, the user community, to use OpenDaylight code, and also getting acceptance among vendors. So there are really two ways in which we expect OpenDaylight code, actually probably more than two ways, but at least two ways in which OpenDaylight code will get consumed. One is perhaps directly by users who have the sophistication and the capability and the interest in doing that. And secondly, consumed by users embedded in vendor solutions. right? So you can go buy a solution from vendor X that has OpenDaylight code in it, and vendor X has benefited from having OpenDaylight code because they've been able to cut their development cycle significantly in terms of getting a product out of market. So we see multiple different models in which OpenDaylight code will get distributed and accepted. But getting acceptance is a key goal. And then the third thing, which actually is probably more important than the other two, is really getting a thriving community around OpenDaylight. To have a set of developers that are contributing, to really have the code used in a broad sense, and a lot of folks adding value above, below, around, building applications on top of OpenDaylight. So that community, both of users, the community of developers, is something that's critically important. And Matt talked about the Hackfest that's going on right now. What we are doing on a regular basis is bringing together developers to really start working with each other, right? So building up that spirit of community, so developers can start understanding, what the code base is all about, what we're trying to create, and then B, start working with each other and knowing each other. So the industry value, I think I've referred to some of these points, but let me just kind of walk through them. It's creating the broad SDN code base that I talked about, that anyone can use. You don't need to be a member to use OpenDaylight code. It's available for download. You can actually go to the website right now if you haven't already and download code and start using it. In fact, using it in commercial products, provided you're consistent with the open source license that we have. We expect that creating a common environment, a common base, is something that will be really valuable in terms of accelerating the development of applications. We expect that innovation. We think that startups can benefit a great deal, right, by leveraging the open source code base that we will have at OpenDaylight. So in order to deliver, for example, an SDN solution, you don't need to go and build a lot of the plumbing. You can focus on areas where you really are potentially adding differentiation. So we expect this really to help the industry move forward, right? I know there's a lot of skepticism that has been expressed in various parties about the fact that this was started by large players, and there's a viewpoint again that I think people have stated where this is really an attempt by some of the larger players to perhaps slow down the market. It really isn't the case, right? I mean, if you're involved in the mailing list and involved in the technical activity, you will see there's a very strong, thriving community and a very strong, real push to get this out and to get code out and to really help, the acceleration and the adoption of SDN. The governance of OpenDaylight is twofold, right? As I said, membership is open to all, so anyone can become a member, right? There are different levels of membership. All you need to do is choose your level of membership and pay your money, and you're a member, right? There's two governance mechanisms we've put in place. One is the board of directors, and that really focuses on kind of broader kind of policy decisions, marketing, operations, sort of the business leadership of OpenDaylight. The technical community, the technical work is really completely distinct from the board. So the board has no control over the technical steering committee. The technical steering committee operates as an independent entity. It is populated by the heads of the various projects. And it provides technical direction, it provides project selection, and it makes technical decisions. The methodology is really based upon, the best code wins. It's a meritocracy. The discussions are completely transparent. Anyone can participate in these discussions. There are meetings every week. You can actually dial in and even as a non-member, actually participate in the discussion. Right. So the technical steering committee meetings are totally open. The mailing lists are totally open. Anyone can subscribe. So there really has been an attempt to make this as transparent as possible. So you can very clearly see there's no backroom deals going on. Decisions are made in public, and debates are held in public. Right. So there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of very heated sometimes discussion in terms of what technical approach makes sense. But it's all done, in public, on public mailing lists, and the meetings as well are open to all, and in both in terms of listening as well as participation. The technical steering committee also controls the project lifecycle management. So projects are proposed, right, by members, and there's a whole variety of different members that have proposed different kinds of projects, both not just by members, by non-members too, and you'll see some of that. What the technical steering committee does is it governs, it makes decisions in terms of how projects move through the life cycle. So projects are initially in incubation stage, then they get to mature, and then they get to I forget the details, but I mean there's sort of a well understood hierarchy in which the projects move through the life cycle, and the technical steering committee defines when a project advances from one stage to the next stage. The code has been contributed by a whole variety of different companies, and we'll see that in a second. There's both pre-existing code, there's newly created code specifically for OpenDaylight. Our goal going forward is to have roughly biannual coordinated release cycles. You shouldn't hold us exactly to that, but I mean our goal is that's generally our goal. 2013 December is the first release. It's called codenamed Hydrogen. We will release all code from OpenDaylight under Eclipse Public License (EPL), which is a well understood, well used open source license. And let me just flip to this chart because I think I want to leave a little time for questions. This talks about the content of the Hydrogen release. And I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can go into the website, you can see a lot more detail in each of the projects. But really what I want to do is show the breadth of what it is that we're delivering, right? So in December, we will have obviously the controller, which is a key component, an enabling component. But then there's a set of applications, things like the VTN application that NEC is bringing forward, things like OpenDove that IBM is bringing forward, the Defense for All that Radware is bringing forward. So these are all things which are going to be running as applications on top of the controller, integrated in with the controller. And a set of southbound interfaces, right? So things like different flavors of OpenFlow southbound, OVSDB, a variety of other things, right? So you can also see the nature of the contributors, right? The nature of the contributors as well. You see big names like Cisco and IBM, and you see lots of other players, NEC, Pantheon, Plexi, Radware, University of Kentucky. You see folks like ConnectStream who are actually not even members of OpenDaylight, but are contributing to the code base. So it's a fairly broad and, in our mind, extremely valuable package that'll get released in December, and you'll expect to see, on an ongoing basis, more and more stuff coming out. So let me stop there because I think I want to leave a little time for questions, and perhaps turn it over to Matt and the floor.
So any questions on OpenDaylight? Go ahead, in the white shirt.
Yeah, Inder, what strikes me on your goals on slide 4 is the glaring omission of multi-vendor interoperability.
Multi-vendor interoperability? If I'd omitted that, that's obviously inadvertent. That's obviously a key aspect of what we want to do. Yeah, I mean, without question, right? I mean, that's one of the real value propositions of an open source code movement.
Christoph.
So, how do you see your members making money out of open source?
Make money out of open source? Oh, there's so many different ways, right? I mean, IBM's done this very successfully, right? You know, traditionally, and so you know, I mean, one very sort of straightforward way, well, maybe not straightforward, but one obvious way is, you know, you can distribute the code and support it, right? I mean, Red Hat being a prime example, you know, of that kind of model. Another model is to embed the code in products and solutions that you sell, right? And really sell a solution that has OpenDaylight as a component inside of it, right? And another mechanism, of course, is by adding value, you know, and implicitly with the solution approach, you would do that. You would add value either above or around. You'd bundle that with support. You'd bundle that with services. Open source really, in many ways, is a component, right, of a larger product offering, right? So I mean, there are many different examples of people making lots and lots of money out of open source. IBM's built multi-billion-dollar businesses, you know, based upon open source. So it isn't a new model. Yes.
Inder, are you aligning or coordinating your activities with the Open Networking Foundation?
Yes, absolutely. We're aligning. I mean, I wouldn't say coordinating, because that sounds like we're kind of working in lockstep. We're very much cognizant of the fact that the Open Network Foundation has an extremely important complementary role to play to OpenDaylight, and we look very closely to them to define, you know, standards, define, you know, what we need to do certainly in terms of open flow, and you know, as they expand the scope of what they do, you know, we will, you know, work with them to understand how the standards that they create, you know, impact the work that we do, right? So we have absolutely no interest in overlapping what they do, but we also recognize that you know, there may be periods of time, right, when you know, when they're perhaps pointing in one direction, we're pointing in another direction, but we will keep, you know, trying to keep ourselves aligned as much as we can. Yes, please.
How do you see SDN?
How are these coming together?
Yes.
Well, with quantum, or I guess neutron, right, we will have, I don't know if that's part of that was one of the projects here, or whether that's something that's being done separately. I'm not sure. There will be neutron plugins to OpenDaylight, right? I mean, there already are, and they will be. And I don't know if that's part of the hydrogen release. Maybe not. But there are lots of people doing those kinds of things, right? And you will see that as part of OpenDaylight, right? Now, as far as NFV is concerned, I'm not quite sure that I can make any really intelligent comment in terms of how you know, these components map into NFV. I mean, I think there's obviously you know, there are a lot of players at the table, right? You know, folks like Brocade and others, you know, who have strong interest in NFV and are very closely involved in OpenDaylight as well. And I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to leverage OpenDaylight code and NFV solutions, and hopefully have the NFV you know, directions and NFV community influence, you know, what we're doing, right? You know, you can see some things that are very much service provider focused. For example, netconf and Yang, right? Which is something that certainly is very much part of, you know, part of that service provider NFV community, is part of our release here. So we're trying to really make this code base something that can get leveraged by both enterprise solutions focused on data centers in cloud, solutions focused on cloud service providers and solutions focused on other kinds of service providers, right? And we have folks at the table who have interests in each of these areas and who are driving components, based upon those interests.
So, Inder, I have a last remaining question for you, and then we're going to invite up the rest of the speakers from this morning so that we can ask some more questions to all the speakers. But one that we hear a lot on SDNCentral is, what do you see as sort of the first candidate use case where someone's going to take OpenDaylight and morph that either into a product or a service? And what do you think that first use case is that's going to get downloaded and have an opportunity for folks to get their hand on and say, hey, this solves a real problem?
Well, I mean, they're already, when you say use cases, I mean, what you really, I guess one question would be, what are the products? What are the first products that you might get, right? I mean, I don't know if I can speak for anyone other than IBM in this. I mean, it's hard for me to do that. I mean, I am aware of lots of activity going on, but it's probably inappropriate for me to really comment. But let me just kind of talk about it from an IBM point of view.
Yeah,
right?
that'd be great.
I mean, in IBM, we have plans, right, to release in. I'm not going to give you specific dates yet because we haven't announced formally, but we have plans to release a product that's going to be based upon OpenDaylight, and what it'll do is it'll have it'll have the ability to effectively control both an overlay as well as the underlying infrastructure using the same controller with the same set of applications and the same set of APIs, right? And that's something that you will see out of IBM, leveraging very, very heavily the OpenDaylight code, both code that we have contributed to OpenDaylight as well as code that others have contributed to OpenDaylight. And we think there's a whole bunch of different use cases that we're already working with customers on, to provide, to be essentially create some unique value that'll enable. And I do know that there are, at least half a dozen other examples that I'm aware of, and probably a lot more, where vendors have fairly advanced development activities underway to leverage the OpenDaylight code. So you will see a whole set of products, right, based upon OpenDaylight.
Excellent. Now I have a question for the audience, which is, how many people here have downloaded OpenDaylight? All right, not bad.
Okay, well, let me show you where to go.
All right, now how many people will have it downloaded by the end of the day? Inder, thank you very much for your presentation today and educating us all on OpenDaylight.